Bruchim Abayim, Morai Barabotai, we are continuing Ashur Charuch, Orachaim, Ilchot Shabbat, Siman Resh, Mem, Dalit, and we're up to Seif Vav, and the Vav, Amud Aleph, of the regular prince of Mishna Berura, Yehudia Kone Meches. Now you want to know what happens back in the day. The taxes were actually sold, the right of tax by the king or by his elements to locals that would pay the government or the king a certain amount of money, and they would have the right of taxing people. They would, of course, make some nice parnasa on this as well. Now, a Jew that bought the meches, and now he is hiring a Eno Yehudi, a non-Jew, to go around collect taxes for him. And many times, the non-Jew could be doing that on Shabbat. Is that mutar or is that asur? You have the right of taxing the city, and you're hiring a non-Jew to go around and actually collect the taxes that you have. You have the letter of the king that you are the guy with the taxes, and they have to pay taxes based on their number of people in the household, and so on. There are different types of taxes. They used to be different type of taxes, even in the time of Chazal. And the Shcharuch says, mutar. That is permissible, but provided that it is bekibolet. What does that mean? You tell the goy, he says, every $100 that you collect, I will give you $5. So now, when he goes on Shabbat knocking on doors, right, exhausting himself for collecting more, what is he thinking? Is he thinking the Jew, or is he thinking himself? He can care less about the Jew. He does it because he wants his 5% cut. And if he does 100, he gets 5. If it's 200, he gets 10. That's 500, right? You see how this works. So he wants to make more money, and therefore fully is adata de nafshe ka'avid. He's doing it for himself. And Ramah adds over here, V'chen yuchal laskira meches lechol ha-shabbatot leno Yehudi. The Jew could actually rent out or sell out the right of collecting on all the Shabbatot to any Yehudi. And Yehudi kacharevach shel Shabbatot la'atzmo, and the goy is going to collect whatever he collects on Shabbatot for himself. We're not concerned that people are going to say, oh, they paid by a Jew as a socher to work as a regular po'el based on hours or day. We're not concerned people are going to think that way. Why? Because in this such a case that you're involving a high level of loss of profits, we're not choshesh for what people are going to say, even though that it's not necessarily a derech of how to do it. It could be day paid by other people, but here you're not day paid. The only shaila is maybe a little bit of a chashash of marit ayin, and on that he says the memekom tzedaka gavna lo chasheshu v'Yisrael ha'memuneh al matbea shel melech. The same would be with a person that is in charge of coining the currency of the king. In other words, every king that would come, they would have their own currency with their face on the matbea, right? That's how it was. And so someone is in the contractor for the king to create the matbea. It wasn't like right now that you have the treasury and they themselves are in charge of printing the dollar bill. Back in the day, they had someone that was, in charge of, it was the contracting agent for coining the matbea shel melech. So if you have that job, if you have that contract with the king or with the government, hamemuneh al matbea shel melech, dino kedin hamemuneh al meches. Same halacha applies to him as well. Ve'afal pi shemashmi'in kol b'shabbat, even though that when you coining the matbea, you actually make a lot of noise by pressing and banging and whatever you had to use back in the day. It was not the hydraulic press that we have nowadays, or molding that we have the way we have it nowadays. It was the way it was basically you have to bang its surah and try to mold that, and that has hashmat kol, even though that it's mashmiim kol b'shabbat b'hakat hamatbea, it's still mutar. Ve'ayin lekaman. We're going to speak about this a little bit more in upcoming simanim. But the Jew should not be sitting next to him, watching him, monitoring him, because that already is going to become a problem. Now, on that says the Mishna Berura that the language of Shulchan Aruch is a little bit cryptic. When Shulchan Aruch says maskir lo eno Yehudi, the language of the verbiage of maskir, right, is not correct. It has to be socher, maskir. And again, in your Shulchan Aruchs, some of the newer ones, they already have that fixed in parentheses. If you take a look, imhu bekibolet, when the Shulchan Aruch says it has to be provided that you're doing a contract job, that you don't care about when he does it and how he does it, you just care about the fact that he does it, and then he gets paid a percentage like a aris. The Mishnah Berura writes, the as shari midina, then halachically, technically speaking, is mutar, because you're not doing anything that involves transgression of Shabbat. The only question is marit ayin, that we're going to deal with in just a moment. כמו באורוד לעבדן בראש סימן רש נ"ב, מותר ליתן לו קודם שקיעת החמה וכו', because he is doing it for himself. When the goy is collecting the taxes, he's thinking about the 5%, 10%, whatever it is that he's getting as a cut, and therefore it's mutar. Again, this is comparing our Siman with Resh Nunbet, which we have not done yet, and therefore we're not focusing on explaining all these things until we get to Siman Resh Nunbet. But nevertheless, even if the esek, if the business is famous to be a Jewish business, over there, in the case of Siman Resh Nunbet, is something that is known to everybody, and therefore it becomes a little bit more of a problem. But nevertheless, here, even though it could be something that people know about, that Reuben just bought the taxes from the king, right? Who has the taxes this year? Oh, it's Shimon. So even though that people know that this is a Jewish business, and it's a milta de parhesia, because now he's going to go, Shimon and Reuben himself is going to be knocking on every door, collecting taxes. So it's like mamash parhesia. You can't get more parhesia than that. Here, Chazal were matir because there's a large amount of money at stake. If you don't do it on Shabbat, it will be a tremendous peseda for him, because he's not going to get to round up the community and be able to tax everyone. And then he's paying this money, millions of dollars he paid to the government from his pocket, and he can't recoup that if he's not able to work, one day during the week. The Adam Bahul al Mamono, and we are concerned that he's going to be too nervous about his parnasah, his money. And if you don't allow him, he's going to do it anyways. He's going to come and do it himself even, and therefore he's going to be bordering on a Yisur Deoraita. By doing so, the Shema Yechtov Pitka Kederech HaMochsin, because he has to keep track, and he's not going to be able to remember, so he's going to come to write it. And of course, even writing itself is machloket, in Laz, Lashon HaKodesh, what's Deoraita, what's the Rabbanan. But nevertheless, this is going to become a massive problem, and therefore Chazal knew the limits of people, and they say, you know what, you could have your goy work with you, so long as the issue is only marit ayin. You take care of the actual technical problems of Hilchot Shabbat. If you're left only with marit ayin, okay, we could live with that in this case of peseda. But if he's mashmad b'meches she'en kotvin, but in meches that you don't write, kegon otan shlokchin mine ma'achal b'meches, those who collect food and whatnot, as meches asur afilu al yedei ero Yehudi. That's going to be asur even through an ero Yehudi. Lo yavol yedei isur deoraita afilu ilo sharinan le, because that is not going to end up with a deoraita issue even if you don't let it. So what's going to happen? He's going to do it himself. So he's doing a Darabanan anyways. So Mali is going to be over on this Darabanan or that Darabanan. So therefore we just got to put our foot down and say it's not mutar in those cases. Avalataz v'amagen Avraham maski dafilu bofen ze sharinan. They say no, it's mutar across the board in every case, and it is not so simple what Maran actually holds. The Tazim Maran, I'm saying, take a look at the Reb David Yosef's Sefer Arvadia's son, Halacha Berura. He actually has a long arichut back and forth trying to see what the dot of Shulchan Aruch and hence the Sfaradim should be over here. But nevertheless, it's Machlokit Acharonim. But the Jew himself, of course, cannot go around on Shabbat, even if you are only accepting platters of food and fruits. That will be still asur, because you, even though that they're not muktzeh or anything, but you're taking taxes from people, and that will be asur. Afilu im lo huva michutz latchum, even if it's within the tchum and all those things, and it's not chashash of seda mechubar, all those other issues of mimetzoch efsecha v'daber davar, as the Shulchan Aruch will discuss in Siman Shin Vav, still will be asur. Okay, now this would be a lot of industries in the government back in the day were privately sold to people by the king or the governing agent, and one of them was like making salt. Massive industries that they were like a monopoly of the king. You're not allowed to do it yourself as a private company. Many of these things, nowadays you talk about healthcare, versus other areas that, do you make it governmental thing, or do you allow for private agents? Back in the day, a lot of these things were government wing, and the government just sold the rights yearly basis or 5 years, whatever it is. So one of the simple things that they used to do was salt. Making salt was a monopoly of a king. You're not allowed to do it unless you bought the rights from the king. So says the Mishnah Berura, if you are the guy that actually bought that, so what's going to be the halacha? Take a look. Says the Mishnah Berura, יהודי ששכר בישול המלח מן השר, מותר להשכיר לו פועלים בקיבולת, שאם יעשה לו כך וכך מלח, you say every 100 pounds of salt that you create, right, you get this X amount of dollars. ואף על פי שהכלים והעצים הם של ישראל, even though that all the material, the wood, the fuel, the pots, and all the utensils belong to the Jew, still is mutar. Because again, we're passing like Bet Hillel, that your vessels could be working on Shabbat, your fuel could be used on Shabbat. The Jew's correct is working for you, but he's also working for himself, right? You could do it. I don't care about the fuel; it's going to be the same fuel. I don't care if he does it on Shabbat, Sunday, Monday. I don't care. So as long as I don't care, even though that is my vessels and my fuel that's being used, it still doesn't make a difference, because the production is what matters, and that I don't care if it's going to be on Shabbat. And he is doing it for himself, because the more he makes, the more money he's going to get. But he can't hire someone based on daily payments, saying you work a week and you get this much, 7 days, this much money. Because then you are actually benefiting from his work that he's doing on Shabbat, because the more he works, the more you get paid. And you actually care about the week, what day of the week he's working. Fine. And this is, of course, in time, the time frame is not really important. We mentioned all these things before. One more piece here. On the words of the Rama, that the non-Jew, the second way of doing this, says the Rama, is if you are selling the business for Shabbat to the non-Jew. Instead of making him an aris, that he gets a cut from whatever he does, you're just selling the Shabbat business to him, right? So in that, says the Mishna Berura, da. The mashma mikol poskim, the lo yitiru afilu b'mkom hefsed gadol. You have to understand that all the poskim seem to clearly indicate that even in a scenario that you have a lot at stake to lose if you don't have the work done on Shabbat, it's only mutar be'ofen zeh shesiyara shulchan aruch. Only in the case of shulchan aruch will be mutar. Dehainu, o bekibolet o shmaskilo et guf harevach. Either you're doing kibolet, which is like a arisut, that he gets a cut, or shemaskilo et guf harevach, that you're actually saying everything you make on Shabbat is yours. The bechol zeh, how? Because both of these cases, when he's working, he's doing it for himself. Because in the first scenario, he's working because he gets a cut. In the second scenario, he's working for himself because he gets everything. It's his business on Shabbat. But if it's a worker per day that is working for you today, then in every scenario is going to be asur, regardless of what you tell him. Right, that's what Harabadia mentions as well. His son mentions as well. Umizet tedan. From this, Chafetz Chaim says you should know. Those people who have like a drinking place, a coffee place, a bar, right? And then Erev Shabbat already they hire a goy. Say, okay, I can't be here. It's my Shabbat. You handle the business, right? La'asok b'mechirat hamashke, that they are going to be selling the coffee, selling the drinks. Shelo kadin hemosim. They are not doing something that's halachically feasible. The af im nachshov miniat harevach yom Shabbat lefset gadol, because even if you say it's a big loss for Shabbat not to have the business makom, halo lo yitiru b'schir yom mamash. The hefset gadol is only mutar on top of kavlanut. When you have no actual problem, it's only an issue of marit ayin, that's when it's mutar. But when you have schir yom, that is mamash asur. It's not a matter of how it looks to the onlooker. It's not a marit ayin issue. V'gam de ulai hu rak bichlal miniat harevach, and it's also not so pashut, because you're not losing your drinks. Right? Over there, if you don't don't round up the whole community, get taxes, you lost money, because it's a time-sensitive thing. But here, I have the drinks. I don't sell them today, I'll sell them tomorrow. It's just a revenue that I could have had more, and I don't. But it's not losing money from pocket. כמו שכתבו האחרונים, לעניין תנור ומרחס, על כל פנים, אין להתיר אלא באופן שסיר שולחן ערוך וערימה. Only cases that are mentioned are mutar, nothing outside the realm of the two cases of Shulchan Aruch. ואף על כל פנים עדיין העסק נקרא על שם ישראל, זה מותר משום פסדה. But if you have done the correct methodologies of heter, even though that the business still is considered on the name of the Jew, still is mutar. Ulefi ma shkatavnu b'shem hataz. Later on, he's going to bring a taz that this whole thing becomes mutar based on the taz. Even if the Jew is sitting from far and watching that the goy should not steal the cash that he is getting from the business. But you have to be careful to stay outside of it from the far and not get inside the ring, basically, with the business. You're just watching it from outside, even according to the Taz. Fine. that basically is the gist of this Seif. There's another element that the Berura Halacha discusses over here, which there's not going to be enough time for doing right now, but Be'ezrat Hashem, we will continue this in the days to come.